Hi, everyone. I am really happy, as always, to be with you all and to have the chance to talk a little bit. I'd like to start with reviewing a koan. In case 53 of the Blue Cliff record, Matsu asks Pai Chang about some wild ducks that are flying by. He asks, "What is that?" And Chang answers, "Wild ducks." Then Ma asks, "Where have they gone?" Chang answers, "They have flown away." And Ma twists his nose, not very nice, but that's what he does, and asks, "When have they ever flown away?" This gives a sense of the ducks that are here and the ducks that are no longer here. So if we talk about the ducks that are no longer here, that have flown away, where are they? So I'd like to explore the idea that all of our knowledge outside of the present is a mental fabrication, and that our true self, our true reality, takes place right here, right now, in our living, breathing reality, rather than in the constructed reality of ourselves that we have in our minds. So I hope to look into the fabricated aspect of that. I think that we explore the idea of being present quite a bit, but maybe not look into the constructed or fabricated aspect of our reality in as much detail. Roshi has brought this up several times over the last couple of years and sparked my interest in it. And so I've been looking into it a little bit more. So I hope to look into that and discuss it a little further in a kind of a structural way, kind of a loose structural way, because it's not a matter of academic expertise of any kind. There are probably psychologists and neuropsychologists who have explored this subject in more technical depth, but my exploration is more from an experiential angle, as most Zen things are. And I hope you can check in with your own experience to see if it makes sense to the way that you construct your reality as well. So if we say that past events, like the ducks that fly by and that are no longer there, that turn into mental fabrications, this is not to say that events don't happen or that everything is an illusion or that the ducks are not real. Though things really do happen, and we may record them so-called accurately or less accurately, or may add our own distortions to them, they do take place at the time that they exist. But whatever our perception of the event is at the moment, whether it's a sunset, a conversation, a trip to the supermarket, or something more important, the moment it takes place, something weird happens to it, because we still know about it and understand that it happened, but it's not right there in front of us anymore. It turns into a mental image or a set of mental images. And often those memory traces are accompanied by an action recording, like a little mental video. And we can replay that video and relive what happened, whether it was a moment ago or a decade ago. Though some of the older tapes get a little crusty and vague. And that's one way that, as with real videotapes, I guess we don't have videotapes anymore, with real MP3s, or that's not it either, but MP4s, there you go. That's one way in which we can distinguish things that happened a long time ago and things that are said to have happened more recently and have a fresher, newer memory record. So we have these recordings of everything that happened, at least everything that we noticed or perceived to one degree or another. In other words, we don't record what we would call reality as a whole, if there is such a thing, but we record our experience of it. And these recordings make up a kind of library in our mind. And it's a very complicated library system. Our mind is really quite complex and sort of elegant in its arrangement. Rather than just having a stack of recordings or just having a straight narrative record of movie with a timestamp of everything that happened, there's a massive kind of intertwined set of snippets, pictures, longer recordings that are cross-referenced under a multitude of categories and associations. And those memories can pop up in various combinations. You know how the iPhone algorithm will collect some pics and clips from your past year and put them together into a little slideshow called Autumn in Massachusetts. And it'll put together all the things it can find in that category and make it seem like a very sensible narrative, as if that's just the way everything happened that year. And you can have another category that comes in and says, family times or something like that. And then it'll be all the times with your family over the year. And that'll seem like that's the whole narrative. So our minds have countless algorithms like this. You know, the iPhone is just copying us. And they collect and associate various memories in various combinations. It's very fluid, so you may have a totally different group of images that pop up in the mind or associate with each other from one day to the next, or from 1 hour to the next, sometimes, and to some extent from one moment to the next. I really like that person. On the other hand, they did this. Maybe I don't like them so much. No, I do like them. They did this. Those groupings are very selective, but they may be a little bit arbitrary too. They leave some things out and include other things in the grouping. And then the next time they may include some other things and leave some of the first ones out. Like it says for a lot of people's relationships on their Facebook page, and this is a weak joke, it's complicated. This library in our minds that gives us a personal history is also further complicated by being associated with emotions that are connected to various recalled events. And some may be very casual emotional connections, and some of them that were more important to us may have deep emotional associations that cause a lot of feeling when we think of them. And the sense of past memories being actual is further bolstered by the traces of past events that are left in our body and nervous system. In a sense, we continue to embody the past and experience aspects of it in 3 dimensions, even after the events themselves are no longer there. The event is not really still taking place in concrete reality, as we could call it, but it may feel like it is in some ways. And that may especially be true in the case of traumatic events that leave a strong impression. In a way, we're reliving or reenacting those past events that are no longer there with our own bodies and minds. I will say something more about this a little later. And it also depends on how closely I engage with those memories, how much feeling it brings up. If I think casually of my old girlfriend from 20 years ago, I don't have a very strong reaction. But if I start looking into it further and really remembering what it was like to be with her, and when we had a strong relationship many, many years ago, I might start to have some of the old sentiments start to pop up and come back more strongly. So I don't do that. Just kidding, another joke. We have these associations with our senses too. Smells bring back memories, and so do especially old songs that we used to listen to, and a whole scenario can pop back up in our minds and seem very real, become more present. Sometimes a whole scenario will pop into our minds when we hear something from the past. And again, it may be accompanied by strong feelings, depending on what we're recalling. These associations, images, action movies, and emotional connections that we have to past events make up a very important function of the mind. They give us a sense of identity, a sense of a personal self with a history, They give us a sense of a narrative, a story that starts at our birth and goes along sequentially up to the present moment. But the story that we are carrying in our minds actually no longer exists and is not really a sequential narrative. It's a collection, but it has time associations that we remember to orient ourselves to a timeline, and we keep reconstructing it in different ways. In my day job, I'm an acting teacher, and one of the tools I created, and others have probably created something extremely similar in their own ways, is a simple tool called a timeline. It's especially important in film acting because in film, unlike theater, everything is shot completely out of sequence in most films. They may shoot all the night scenes or all the scenes in a particular location or all the rainy scenes all in a row, and then they stitch them together into the narrative order, just like we do in the editing room. So if you're an actor and they say, okay, we're shooting scene 62 in the hotel, after you've gotten back together for the second time, the actor may have no idea what's happened up until then or right before then. Even if they studied the script, they're thrown into scene 62 and then maybe have to backtrack to scene 38 after that. A totally different set of circumstances. So I created this little tool. You go through the whole script, put each scene in a box, going from left to right, and summarize each scene you're in with 1 or 2 sentences. You get the gist of it. And then if they say you're doing scene 18, you can skim through the whole sequence and pay closer attention to scenes 16 and 17 and find out what's happened before, review it, and where you are in the film, which is to say, your life, the life of the character that you're playing. And so you're able to jump around and orient yourself and prepare for the scene. And it seems like, yep, I'm right here in the right place in the narrative. And it fits along the sequential timeline. Then you can look at the next scene you're preparing yourself for, even if it's in a very different place, and see what you're up to and what leads up to that event and orient yourself in the timeline again. Keep in mind that everything in the script is already written. In a sense, it's already happened, and you are reenacting it as an actor. You've already read it, and you're going through it again. And we do the same thing in our minds to orient ourselves to different parts of our lives and different memories. We've got a timeline tool in our minds that creates the narrative of our lives and remakes it and reconsiders it and rewrites it, which they sometimes do on set as well, depending on new information. And we can use it to jump around and orient ourselves to different supposed time periods, just like the actor does. I recalled that my parents told me years ago that they met as counselors in sleepaway camp and fell in love by running into each other at different events. They met during activities in the camp, struck up a relationship, and wound up getting married. In more recent years, after they passed away, my dad's sister told me that she was the one that introduced them and encouraged them to start going out. A different story than I had heard before. Now that part of my history has been rewritten and altered somewhat. So the past, rather than being unalterable, is a work in progress. If the past was a concrete reality, it wouldn't change when we get new information. It's a story. So all of this is a mental record. And the reason I like to call it mental fabrication, which fits in with some Buddhist categories, is that it's like a well-edited movie, which gives the feeling of reality along with strong memories and emotions, and gives the impression of still being a concrete reality by associating all those things. But it's not a concrete reality anymore. It's a reconstructed mental production. And yet we treat these memories and respond to them as if they're still happening in some sense. There's nothing wrong with replaying and considering and enjoying the past events that are no longer taking place. The problem with them is that we are often imprisoned or constrained by the sense of reality and the sense of self that these mental records communicate to us. And many of us, I know I do, spend a bit too much time trying to relitigate past events that have been over for a really long time. And even the ones from yesterday that are still nice and fresh are totally over as a concrete reality and have become a mental record, a mental reconstruction, which may or may not be as accurate as we think it is, a mental fabrication. When Pai Chang's birds flew away, one instant later, they were gone. By the way, relitigate is one of my favorite words. I really like it, even though I'm not a lawyer, because it has an implication that I think is very important for our purposes. It has a sense of re-arguing with the past and trying to mold or change or redo it. When we argue with the past and try to rationalize or justify or change it, we are arguing or fighting with a ghost. So the mental record with which we construct the past is meant to be a tool. It's a very complex and really useful tool. It's important to remember what I said to someone at the last meeting so I can plan the next meeting and not be starting all over again every time I meet. But it's also good to know it's a mental fabrication and it doesn't exist anymore. If something is written on paper, I know I can throw it out or rewrite it, but we tend to not realize that our mental record is the same sort of thing. There's a further stretch to go from there, and that's to take a good look at the timeline in our mind and realize that it's a construction project and that it doesn't really exist anywhere in the world. And that's something interesting to look at and see that we're giving a lot of weight to something that really is ethereal. All the things in my timeline with which I construct my sense of personal history and identity and which make up my life story are over already and no longer in operation. What's still operating is what's happening now. A lot of that may have come from past causes, but what's happening now is what exists now. So I'm not stuck with what I think happened in a particular way and who I think I am based on past events. That mental record doesn't exist anywhere in the world. It's all in my mind. I would not suggest to the average person to experiment with dropping the timeline and seeing that the narrative of memories and emotions that make up my timeline is just a fabrication. Doing that in a haphazard way could possibly not be a good thing to do. I think that could be pretty disorienting. And if it seems disorienting to any of us, we may want to engage it gently and just consider it gently rather than too radically. But as Zen practitioners, we are a little more used to letting go of thoughts, beliefs, and memories and practicing just being present without all that baggage, which is basically what shikantaza is in our Soto tradition. Being present, letting thoughts come and go. And as you might experiment with looking at the mental productions that arise and say, they're just and only thoughts, and they no longer exist in reality. I don't engage in that way all the time, but sometimes I have a flash of there being no past to the left of me and no future to the right, just the couch on the left and the window on the right. My mental space becomes unencumbered by the baggage of thinking that my mental reality is actually here in the here and now, except as a thought. Yes, it's here as arising thoughts, as mental activity. Those take place in the here and now just as much as the bird flying by. But unlike the bird, I don't see it with my eye, but with my mind's eye. And it's a different kind of reality. The bird in my mind is not alive, never will be. The bird in the tree, on the other hand, is singing a sweet song and is real. When the past falls away, even for a moment, and there is only what is present, a break, you could say, for mental fabrications of the past and the timeline, there's a sense of freedom to be, breathe, and to inhabit this very particular place that is taking place right now. And the moments which seem to be passing from past to present to future melt into the moment, which has no length and no measure. As the tea lady said to the intellectual scholar Tokusan, past mind is ungraspable, present mind is ungraspable, future mind is ungraspable. What mind are you going to use to drink this tea? I'd like to add a cautionary note, which is that while this perspective can potentially be very freeing, it's not a perspective that can allow you to bypass unresolved trauma. One of the things that makes the timeline seem more real is that the emotions and reactions that come from past events get lodged in the body and nervous system. The patterns and reactions that have been lodged in the mind and body may take therapeutic work to release. But it may be helpful to look at what is here to work on here and now, rather than looking back to a situation that no longer exists and thinking that it is still real, even though the traces may still be there. There's also a lot we can do with this understanding. We can see how we look back at selected past events in our mental record and assess ourselves, our lives, and others in various ways, and see what those operations are really about, since they all really take place as ways of looking at things in the present moment. Thanks.